on the borderline. I think that could count for two. Why not?
I'm Max King and I represent Slow Food MV, and we're working together with the Native Earth Teaching Farm on a reintroduction of this duck to the island. It's an endangered species and it was raised in New York as a meat duck in the late 1800s. But when commercial interest came in, this duck went by the wayside in favor of commercial breeds. So we're working to reintroduce this. We're doing a CSA with Native Earth. And we're doing workshops, and as you can see, educational materials to try to bring people back to the idea of raising these ducks, either as breeding them or meat, whichever one chooses to do. And they are all qualified as being really good tasting. So you can always consult that list for good tasting, whether it's a vegetable or animal, whatever it is.
So much.
To this time of it. So here we have the local pepper from the gardens of those islanders. I stock it up in freezes well, and I put it in the freezer until
100 berries in a cup, and I put in about 8 cups of these things, so my arm was pretty tired. And then I put them on a baking tray and froze them individually. So
and they'll be, by the time the festival's over, they'll be put back in their boxes because they don't necessarily like light. Fortunately, it's a little dark in here.
We're Island Grown Schools. We're the Islands Farm to School program and a branch of Island Grown Initiative. And we bring school gardens, food and farming-based learning, farm field trips, and healthy local food in the cafeterias to about 2,400 children on the island from 2 to 18 years old. So we're really being able to expose the next generation of vineyarders to knowledge about why the food choices they make is important and how to make healthy choices as they grow.
make another bridge. Anybody else cut? Here, I'll be with you. Double jeopardy over here. You been with her? If you're caught, raise your hand, make another bridge. If you're caught, raise your hand, make another bridge. Somebody's caught over here. Right there. There we go, make another bridge right there. Here we go. All right, make a bridge. Anybody left? Right here. Ooh. All right. Anybody else caught? Raise your hand. You caught? No stopping. Oh, anybody else caught? Make a bridge. We got anybody else caught? Right here. Is anybody left? Oh, okay. Keep going. I don't know. It's 63 over here. If you're caught, raise your hand. This is cut. There we go. Make a bridge. Is anybody left? Oh, we got a few. All right. Here we go. This is too open over here.
I'm so happy to be able to present this great film, Open Sesame, and it really came from a place because we have an initiative going on here in our lovely island, and the screening is going to starting of it, and the idea is we're going to launch a seed library of our own at the West Tisbury Library, and so Ken Green, who is the founder. He's the founder, and he's actually in the film and is here, of the Hudson Seed Library. He is going to help us bring that here, and he's going to be talking afterwards. So this screening was made possible by Living Local and the Farm Institute, Island Grown Schools, and the Hudson Valley Seed Library, so I really want to thank them for making it all happen. And we do hope that this film itself starts provoking some thoughts and some questions and some ideas of what we want to do as far as our library. What is seed saving all about? And hope you'll learn a lot of that kind of starting with this film. And tomorrow, I mean, after the film, please stick around because we have Dr. Jessica B. Harris, who's going to be kind of spearheading a community conversation with Millie Taylor and Ken Green, and kind of answer all of your questions and sort of kind of lead it into where we're going. And then tomorrow at the Living Local Harvest Festival, which is at the Ag Hall from 10 to 3, and then there's a community supper from 5 until 10. But tomorrow at 1 o'clock, Ken is going to be leading a seed saving workshop. So everyone can come and see what that's all about if you have heirloom seeds or native seeds. I don't know what I'm talking about right now, so you'll find out afterwards. So I'm excited that we're here, and I want to thank you. And do know that there's sign-ups being passed around, both for our library and also what Ken's doing. So make sure to sign up because you'll get some great information.
If you go to the Miracle Cure, it would be something that might be advertised, but
This is an observation hive. Oh, am I being in here? Okay. These are our bees. It's an observation hive, so you can see there's 3 different frames that were just pulled out of the hive this morning, and this just enables you to see what they're doing in the hive. We don't leave them in there for a long time. They'll be, by the time the festival's over, they'll be put back in their boxes because they don't necessarily like light. Fortunately, it's dark in here. Is there a KB? You know what? He's the guy you really want to talk to. Oh, the queen is in there. We're gonna have to find her. Okay.
I think that
she's the bigger one. Maybe. That one is big, yeah.
And there's we have honey here. We have some brew down in here. A lot of workers, and the queen is in there. I did see her this morning.
And how did you get them in there?
Careful.
I just took them out of a hive and slid them in. So
And then
it's pretty easy.
You'll take them home and put them back?
In, yeah, so they can survive the winter.
And they drive truckloads of bees around the country to pollinate farms. So it seems like they are portable.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, it does stress them though. It's not just they prefer to stay in one place.
Where's that one place where these bees live?
These particular bees are at our house.
Which town?
In Vineyard Haven. Yep. Because next to put these in here to keep them air from the top. Yeah, you see here. There's little holes so they can go out that way.
Because they've been on the beach, they've been wherever. Put them in a kettle, and you put a little water in them, and you boil the bejesus out of them, and you make juice. The juice then needs to be strained and froze them individually, so it wouldn't get 100 berries in a cup, and I put in about 8 cups of these things. So, and then I put them on a bake pan. Once they're frozen individually, I fire them into Ziploc bags.
It's gone, so I stock it up. It freezes well, and I put it in the freezer until it's time again. So here we have the local pepper from the gardens of those islanders, and buy all the pepper last year from Slipaway and Whipaway Farm. The Scotch bonnet. Throw them in the freezers. And I saved them, and this year the pepper didn't do well at all on the island. So it's a good, last fall they were selling them, I bought as much as I could get.
Right. I'm going to buy one of these. I have to. So, how much
So they
is
make
that?
good, that's 5 and this is 10.
Okay.
And it's a tablespoon per pound. This is a jerk sauce. It's good on your feet.
It's delicious. That's outstanding.
It
Wow.
takes a sinus if you go.
I know, we need napkins.
You're having fun.
I'll go to the ladies' room. Well, do you want to try mine?
Rick, tell us about the blue mussels. Are they indigenous? Are they local? Or
Yeah, all these mussels are local, and shellfish essentially clear the water, and blue mussels are known to be probably one of the best filterers. But these rib mussels, which aren't really eaten, also have filtering capacities. They filter very fine particles as small as bacterial cells. So this was our little joke. We wanted to have the thrill in the, or the, what was it, the mumble in the jungle?
Rumble in the
Rumble
jungle.
in the jungle, yeah.
Thriller
So
in Manila.
you got it. But this is just the face-off of the mussels, and who's going to be the Martha's Vineyard water filtering champ? And equal weights. These animals were weighed. There was a weigh-in yesterday. We had equal weights of the rib mussels and blue mussels, and we added some of the cultured algae that we produced just to show how they, visually how they clear the water. And it's obvious that the blue mussels are going to be the filtering champs this year. These have filtered, but not quite as well or as quickly as the blue mussels.
Well, that works out.
So there's some evidence.
That works out better because you can eat the blue mussel.
Exactly, yeah. The thing is with these, you really can't eat them, but in a lot of areas where we really want to clean up the water, we can't put edible shellfish because it creates a health hazard, because then somebody might harvest. Because these are inedible, we can put these in areas that are close to shellfishing. So that's what's the really neat thing about these. But they're clearing too. You can see the difference between here and here. They just haven't moved quite as quickly as the blue mussels.
Well, I told him he took some of these and then I told him.
You might have Emma talk about the mission of Phragmites. Emma, you want to talk about Phragmites, your project?
So I tried to put together this little display of Phragmites. So this that's standing here is the above ground biomass from a quarter of a square meter, which is this little quadrat sitting on the table. Phragmites have an amazing capacity to take up nutrients from the water, including lots and lots of nitrogen. In other places, like in Europe, where they're not invasive, they actually plant them for wastewater treatment plants. And in situations like that, they can measure the influence that's coming in and what's coming out and how much nutrients these Phragmites are taking up. And the numbers are outstanding. So we were inspired to look at the Phragmites here on the island. So I took some samples from several stands during the summer, and I'll have them tested for nitrogen. And I wanted to think about what if we were to cut these Phragmites when they have lots of nitrogen in their tissues and do something with them. And so taking that nitrogen out of the system. So in this display, I equated this amount of Phragmites in a quarter of a square meter is equivalent to about a dozen cultured oysters, which have about 0.4 grams of nitrogen each, about a liter of average human urine, and about a cup of organic fertilizer that you would put on your garden. All of those have altogether about 5 grams of nitrogen each, which is the same as in a quarter of a square meter. So going forward, I'll get test results back, specifically what these different Phragmites stands have for nitrogen, do some GPS mapping to see how many acres, square hectares of Phragmites do we have on the island, and think about how much nitrogen could we remove from these pond systems if we harvested it. And then going forward from there, what could we do with it? Could we make animal feed or biochar, as we heard from a speaker earlier this morning? Or maybe just compost it. It's nice and green for all of our compost piles. So we're looking to turn lemons into lemonade and find something productive to do with this invasive weed that we have all over the island.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We're Island Grown Schools. We're the Islands Farm to School program and a branch of Island Grown Initiative. And we bring school gardens, food and farming-based learning, farm field trips, and healthy local food in the cafeterias to about 2,400 children on the island from 2 to 18 years old. So we're really being able to expose the next generation of vineyarders to knowledge about why the food choices they make is important, and how to make healthy choices as they grow.
How long ago did you start this program?
We started Island Grown Schools in 2007, so we're just finishing up our 7th year of the program and starting the 8th year.
How many schools are you in?
We're in 14 schools, all 7 of the public schools and at 7 preschools.
Is that all the island schools?
No, there's a few preschools that we don't work with yet, but it's all the rest of the schools on the island.
And do they grow the food at the school?
Yeah, so all of our gardens are food-producing gardens, and our real goal for the garden is to be an educational tool. So really the hope is that kids are being able to reconnect with the source of their food and with natural cycles, and to remember basic skills that people have had for so much of human history about how to grow food, how to save seeds, and then if we get any food out of the gardens, it's a bonus. But we really are, and now the gardens are being very productive, and all of the cafeterias now are sourcing locally grown food from their gardens and from island farms.
Workshops and actually discussions that we'll be having at noon, which is in about 10 minutes. The first one is Nature Connection Mentoring with Saskia Vanderhoop from Sassafras Earth Education. She's going to be outside near the fire. If you walk straight out, you see a lovely fire, and she is an amazing speaker and very knowledgeable. So please go check that out. Also at noon in the front room, we're doing a discussion with Keith Weza from Island University of ITI and he is going to be talking about island perma and discussing the big idea of
got to get along with the team. Transition, right?
It's just like so, it's right around.
There, yeah, you guys can walk over there.
I love that, like the neighborhood.
Yeah. Or even garden games. That's a good one. That we thought about, but long story about
it's a really great transition away from old night lights to a new technology. And you've already paid for this electric, so this is our chance to give back to the community. Thank you very much. Is this sort of a sensor? That's a sensor. And it's really cool if it's plugged in and you go like this, you can make a cool. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Lee McCormack, he is the Martha's Vineyard Poet Laureate, and so he's going to do a lovely poem, and then we're going to get to the music of the Flying Elbows, and we're going to get to some dancing, so kiddos, hold your toes, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. And I think, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who put this on, and thank this beautiful lady for all her work in organizing and supervising it. I'm only going to read two quick poems, and one of them was written for this event on short notice. One poem is just about people gathering and the relationship between each other that we need to have as we go through this short journey. It's called Grazing. There should be nothing left unspoken between us. No sorrow, no gladness, no acts of rancor or forgiveness. Even the young are not young anymore. Nothing left unsaid to wake us in the night from restless dreams or haunt us as we stare at the industry of spiders extruding silky threads to catch random slivers of moonlight silver turning to dusty cobwebs at dawn. And no name unnamed of all we can remember, for this is all we are when every other thing is taken, and we are left with only names in this shell of memories that must be empty before we go. Every well-kept secret and desire must be opened, and flesh of words strung on bones of images fed to a world that hungers to remember we were here, and ached with compassion and laughter and love, and even slept in spite of fear. And when our lives are spoken and laid bare, and we are open one to another, there will be no blossoms more beautiful than these weeds blooming on the tongue, and no more obscure incantations sung in storm-bruised air that do not carry the acrid, sweet, lingering smell of sea sweat from you to me, as we wander together in the pastures of our bodies, grazing like the rare animals we are upon each other. And this was written for tonight on short notice, and it was written hopefully to be a positive point in the spirit of what's going on tonight. It's called Prelude. October is prelude to the withering, the final harvest of island souls, preparing to gather once more before frost's fist forces us to go, sheltering within, as evening slips towards days ever closer to the sea. A time of celebration that we survived another year and now prepare to say goodbye to summer's wealth, gathering to share what earth provides so we may enter and abide the coming winter. It is a time of praise and prayer for life's continuation and for the hunger-ending gifts that we receive as we are fed and take from the world all that sustains us physically, and from each other all that sustains us spiritually, until in this brief, intense, and radiant journey of spirit through matter, a time comes that we must give back to earth these gifts we are allowed to share. Thank you. Good night.
Called Vineyard Herbs, Teas, and Apothecary. And I travel all over teaching about herbal medicine and natural body care, a little bit of topical things, how to take care of your body externally, how to take care of your body internally, natural health, women's empowerment. I do a lot of talks that empower women, both young girls, teenagers, as well as older women on business, entrepreneurship, natural health, and especially herbal medicine. I have a few books that will be for sale afterwards. The Essential Herbal is my first book. This came out in 2012, and it's a recipe book, and it's chock full of how to make a whole variety of herbal remedies: tinctures, salves, teas, compresses, poultices, powders, salts, lots of different things that you can make in your kitchen, which is really fun, especially for young people or for anyone getting ready for gift giving. But it's focused on how to use plants out of your own garden. Really how to harvest your own weeds or wildflowers or cultivated herbs and make not only wonderful things with them, but very useful, functional, healing things with them. The Authentic Herbal Healer is more of a reference guide. It's about 130 herbs from around the world, and it's based on body system and illness. So it's for when you have an issue come up and you want to know what herbs will help, what herbs are contraindicated, what formulas go well together, what blends well together. And And then this is my new one that I'm very excited to share with you. It just came out, Women Healers of the World. It's 31 women from 20 countries, 16 healing traditions. 20 of the women are contemporary live women. I interviewed them, I traveled around, I got to meet with these extraordinary people, pharmacists, doctors, nurses, shamans, homeopaths, ethnobotanists, a variety of healing traditions, 16 healing traditions, and how these women were trained, how they learned, how many of it was, it's a cultural heritage that they inherit, and they take it on from their parents or their grandparents. Others of them came into it in a variety of more non-conventional ways, but it's full color, it's full of photography of these women, as well as watercolors, because 10 of the women in the book are historic women. They go back, there's Cleopatra, Hatshepsut, Hildegard von Bingen, Trotula Salerno, Marie Henriette Lejeune Ross of Nova Scotia, lots of women who are no longer with us, and a lot of them didn't have photos of them taken because they lived so long ago. And so what I did was I researched what they may have worn, the dress, their culture of the time, and brought together different women who became models for me, and we did photo shoots. And then from those photos, I commissioned watercolor artwork from a local artist in Chilmark, Tracy Thorpe. So she did 10 original watercolors of portraying these women. And for a couple of them, it may be the first portrayal of them ever made. For some of them, they've had other artwork depictions of them in the past, but some of them, it may very well be the first time they've ever been depicted. So this is my many different ways you can approach it, but a fun way to do it, especially if you're new to it, is handcrafting. And by handcrafting, you're making things, useful things with the plants around you, which is really the fun part. And so I wanted to share with you some of the philosophies of what herbalists use when they make medicines. And a foundational philosophy or method really is using a menstruum. So a menstruum is the liquid that you use to pull the concentrated chemicals out of a plant. So lots of plants are sage, rosemary, lemon balm, elderberry, all these wonderful herbs that we have around us or we grow for the kitchen to put in our foods. These have wonderful chemicals in them, such as saponins, flavonoids, resins, polyphenols, essential oils, alkaloids, lots of different things, chemicals that the plant uses for its own benefit while it's alive. We can take those same chemicals and use them for our benefit, for health. And the way that we access those is either to eat them, and we get a little bit in our food. We usually don't eat too many herbs unless they're a flavoring or a spice. But if you really want to have a concentrated amount of these chemicals for your own health, then the best way is to use a menstruum. And a menstruum is a liquid that pulls those chemicals out. So the most common one that we're mostly familiar with is a tea, an herbal tea. It's a water menstruum. So if you're using a water menstruum, it's very simple. You heat the water up to boiling, you pour it on the herbs, and you let it steep. You're making a tea. So most of us are familiar with that. And you strain out the herbs, and what you have is a menstruum, which is your liquid soaked, saturated with the chemicals that you wanted from the plant. So one of these that I brought up today is an herb that a lot of us put in teas. It's very sweet. This is stevia, and it's easy to grow in your garden. It's called sugar bush or sugar leaf because it's super, super sweet. We see it in the grocery store nowadays because it's a fad as a sweetener, but it's really been around for a long time. It's a very common plant that you can grow, very effective at sweetening. So I'm going to pass this around, and feel free to take a little bit and try it. It's just a sweet, lovely leaf, and it really gives you a good idea of what it means to extract these chemicals from the plant. Because when you make a tea out of stevia, or you just put it in your mouth and your saliva is the menstruum and it extracts the sweetness, you can really tell, oh, these chemicals, they come out of the leaves very quickly. So while that goes around, water as a menstruum for herbal medicines is great. It's really the best way to get your medicine for herbal medicines. To make an herbal tea is called an infusion, and you can infuse lots of different herbs, leaves, flowers, roots, barks, in the water, especially leaves and flowers. It doesn't take very long. They're soft matter. When you have, say, echinacea root or various seeds or barks that you want to infuse, that's called a decoction. And a decoction takes a little bit longer. You simmer it for a good 20 or 30 minutes in order to break the cell walls open so that you can get those chemicals out of the plant. So you have an infusion and you have a decoction. Both of those are water-based. Water-based remedies you want to take frequently because they're excreted frequently. They don't last long in your body. There's no fat in them, so they're not stored in the fat cells. It's something that you want to use daily. 3 to 4 cups daily is a typical dose of tea. So you want to make a whole thermos full and enjoy your tea. Other menstruums don't quite behave that way. They're a little bit different. For instance, grain alcohol. Grain alcohol like vodka, rum, port, whiskey, brandy. These are all grain alcohols, and they're very effective at drawing these chemicals out of the plants. So this is elderflower that I harvested, and it's in a base of vodka. So elderflower is wonderful for sinus congestion and fevers. It's really nice for children. It's a very safe herb. It's a very mythical plant, actually. The elderberry tree has a lot of myth and folklore behind it. Really wonderful to work with. You use the elderberry, the flower, and the leaf in different ways. And the flower, you can make a tincture. So what I've got here is a menstruum with vodka in the plant. And when I strain this off, all that will be left is the fiber, really. It will have extracted all the chemicals from the flowers themselves and created what's called a tincture, or an extract. And because it's so concentrated, you don't need a lot. So with a water extract, where you're drinking 3 to 4 cups a day, with a tincture or a grain alcohol extract or an ethanol extract, you only need 25 drops 3 to 4 times a day. So it's by the drop or the quarter teaspoon. Much more concentrated. So I'm going to pass around a sample of this. So this little bottle is elderflower tincture, and you're welcome to sample it, taste it. It's really pretty delicious. The best way to do it is to not touch your mouth to the dropper. Instead, drop a little bit on your hand and then just taste it. I'm gonna pass that around. So these are effective medicines for when you get sick, when you have a cold or the flu, especially with elderflower, the one that's going around now. Because it is, it's called diaphoretic. It can make you sweat, which is useful when you have a fever. It's lightly astringent, very nice for sinus congestion. Good for acute illnesses. This isn't necessarily something you would take long-term for a chronic illness, but more for acute situations. So this is another tincture. I'll pass this one around too. This one is a blend that I have. It contains herbs that are anxiolytic, which means they help relieve anxiety. So feelings of stress, overwhelm, feelings of panic, and even fear. These herbs are renowned as central nervous system tonics to help you take a deep breath and let those feelings of anxiety go. So some of the herbs in this tincture are lemon balm, which is a common mint. Lots of people grow in their garden. Lemon balm is very effective as an anxiolytic. Also for focus and concentration, a lot of people with ADD and ADHD really enjoy lemon balm because they say that it helps remove all the clutter behind their heads, you know, and then they can just focus on one thing. Motherwort. Motherwort is also in the mint family. It's a bitter mint, and it's used herbally for fear and panic. It helps ease that feeling of, oh my God, something is happening, whether it's your toddlers are running around and you can't control them, or something out there is happening that's beyond your control and it's making you stressed. Motherwort will help relax you without being sedative. It's also a heart tonic. The Latin name is Leonura cardiaca, which means heart of the lion. So it gives your heart strength emotionally, but also physically it's actually helping the myocardial muscle. So I'll pass this around. You can sample it the same way. You put a drop just on your hand. Roses are also in this blend, and rose petals are such a nice thing to use, especially for grief. Whenever I help someone who is dealing with grief or sadness or loss, I always add roses. Partly because of the same with motherwort. It's an emotional tonic, but it's also a mild cardiotonic. There are some herbs such as hawthorn that are cardiovascular tonics. They actually reduce blood pressure because they're vasodilators, so they expand, they dilate the blood vessels, and then your heart doesn't have to pump as hard to push the blood through. So hawthorn is one of those, as well as motherwort. So that's an example of a tincture, a menstruum that's in ethanol, grain alcohol. This is an example of one that's in witch hazel. So witch hazel is an extract, or actually a distillate of the witch hazel tree. You can harvest your own witch hazel and make your own distillate of it, but most people just get it at the pharmacy. When you do, it's already mixed with 14% isopropyl alcohol, which is different from ethanol alcohol. So isopropyl you cannot take internally. So this is strictly an external remedy. But something that you can do with it is use it as a spray. So I have an example of that. This is rose spritzer. So I'll pass this around. You can spray it on. Thank you. It's mostly water with a little bit of essential oil, and we'll get into essential oils in a minute, with a little bit of witch hazel. This is a great craft, especially for girls at parties. My daughter loves, when she has a sleepover, having her girlfriends make spritzers because they're so easy and they're fragrant, they smell really good. So feel free to spray it on and try it. So that's an example of a menstruum is witch hazel. So we've got water, vodka, witch hazel. Another one is oil. Just olive oil, any sort of vegetable oil, canola, sunflower, safflower, walnut, almond. Any oil can be a menstruum. It can take from the plants the chemicals that are in it, extract it so that what you're left with is fiber, and then your liquid becomes the remedy. So this is, I didn't make this is a ginger body oil, but it's another example of how you can use herbs and menstruums to create something useful. So same thing, you're welcome to rub this on. It's really nice on sore joints, arthritis, sore knuckles, things like that. It's very warming. So I have recipes for all of these in my book, The Essential Herbal. Here's another example of an oil. It's a body massage oil. This is with lavender. So the best way to make something like this is to take a jar, a small jar, not one of these is usually too big for oil. Chop up your fresh herbs like your rosemary or your sage, whatever you still have growing in your garden. Anything that's really fragrant, chop it up really well. Make sure it's super dry. That's the key thing for making oils. No water allowed. Everything has to be very dry. Put it in your jar, fill your jar up, and then pour your oil over it, whether it's olive oil or sweet almond or whatever you've chosen. Fill it all the way to the top. Take a skewer or some sort of stick, a pencil or whatever, and poke down to release any air bubbles that might still be in it. Fill it up to 1/4 inch of the rim. Cap it, label it so that you know what it is, and then let it sit for at least 2 weeks, preferably longer. Shake it now and then. And then when you open the lid and you strain it through any sort of kitchen strainer, what you're doing is removing the fiber and keeping all those great plant chemicals, including the scent, in the liquid, which is the oil. And then it can be a body oil, you can pour it in the bathtub, you could turn it into a salve, which is this is an ointment, simply by taking 1 cup of the infused oil that you've just made and adding a 1/4 cup chopped beeswax. and simmering them, melting them together very gently on the stove. So I'll pass this around. This is an example of an oil mixed with beeswax that's now a healing ointment. But really what happened was we just infused fresh plants into the oil. So one of my favorite combinations, there are two other menstruums. There's a lot of other menstruums, but two of them are honey and vinegar. And these go really, really well together. And there's several different ways that you can make what's called an oxymel. And an oxymel is a really cool remedy. It's a sweet and sour medicine. So you could make it with lemon juice and sugar, or you can make it with honey and vinegar, which is my favorite way to do it. And there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can infuse in a jar your herbs. Say you're doing garlic. Say you want fresh garlic because it's very antibiotic and it's immune stimulating. You can infuse your garlic in honey and then add vinegar, or you can do it the opposite way. You can infuse it in vinegar and then add honey. Either way works just fine. But what you're doing is roughly half and half honey and vinegar, and you're bringing out the qualities of these plants into a very sweet, sweet tart kind of a remedy that's very tasty. So it works really well for herbs that don't taste good, like, or that are too strong, like garlic, or very bitter herbs, golden seal, walnut, rosemary, rose hips, things that might be too strong, especially for kids. They might not like them. They'll like the sweet tart taste of this, even with those herbs in them. So I'll pass this around too. And when you're making it, if you do decide to, the recipe's in my book, but one key tip is to heat up the vinegar to simmering and then infuse your herbs into it. That helps it extract better. So if you do it with honey, if you infuse your herbs with honey, you can make a really good lavender honey or a mint honey. Super easy. You take your fresh, say mint or lavender. You don't even have to chop it up necessarily. You put it in a saucepan, cover it with honey, make sure that all the leaves are completely covered in the honey, put a lid on it and let it sit on your counter overnight. And then in the morning you put that pot on the stove on very, very low heat, and you heat it just enough to liquefy your honey so that you can strain the herbs out. And then what you've got is this incredibly delicious, fragrant honey that's infused with the properties of these plants that you can use on biscuits and toast. You can use it to sweeten your tea. And it's not necessarily a medicinal dose that you'll be getting, but it is micronutrients. You know, it's helpful for people who just don't have that great of a diet, and it's certainly a delicious treat. So I've mentioned essential oils, and I'll pass some of these around just to smell. They won't be to try, they'll just be to smell, because essential oils are really concentrated. They've been distilled. So this is an extract. We've poured the menstruum or the liquid over the plants and we've extracted. With an essential oil, it's a little bit different. It's actually been distilled in a distillation machine. And it takes a lot of herbal matter to do it. So for instance, I have lemongrass essential oil. So this took pounds and pounds and pounds of fresh lemongrass being distilled through a 3-part distiller to get 1 ounce of essential oil. So it's really concentrated. It only takes a few drops to get what you need. But it's effective because, say, when you make a salve, like the ointment I passed around, you can add just a few drops of an essential oil, partly for fragrance, because they smell wonderful, and partly for antibiotic properties, because they're antifungal. They kill funguses topically, like candida. They kill bacteria and viral infections such as staph, E. coli. They're incredibly potent germ killers. You don't want to put them fresh on your skin. You want to have them diluted in a little bit of carrier oil. But when you add them to a salve or another kind of remedy, they're super effective. So I'll pass these around. I have a lemongrass, spearmint, balsam fir, and cedar wood. So just open the lids and smell them. They're not to go on your skin. So one thing that you can do with essential oils is what we're going to do today. I'm going to demonstrate making a body powder. I figured it would be, I usually do teas, or I do elixirs, or I do honeys, but today I'm going to do a body powder just because it's fun and because I'm starting to think ahead for the holidays and it's a nice gift to give. And it's crafty. So we're going to add some essential oil. I've got lavender, and we're going to make some body powder. And I'm going to have enough for maybe 20, 25 people to take with you if you would like. I've got little bags that we'll put the powder in. So what it is going to be a combination of clay. So clay is not an herb, it's clay. But it's a very useful natural item, and it's something that's here on the vineyard, so it's local. So if you happen to have access to it legally, it's a great resource that you can use to make products with, partly because it absorbs really easily. It absorbs moisture, it absorbs odors, it absorbs oil from your skin, so you can make a clay mask for your face. So that's first. And this is a white kale and clay. You can get it at health food stores. It's pretty common. And we're going to add some arrowroot powder. And arrowroot actually got its name because the root was believed to, because it absorbs, just like clay, it was believed to remove toxins and poisons from arrows in the Middle Ages. They would apply it to somebody's skin who had just been wounded. But it's a great thing for cosmetics too. So you may notice that I'm not using a measuring cup. I really don't like measuring things out. I just kind of eyeball it.
Is it like 1-to-1 or so?
Yeah, it's maybe 1-to-1, or maybe 2 parts clay to 1 part arrowroot. It's really all about what you think. You know, when you're making it, how does it feel on your skin? How does it look? How does it smell? And it's a great way to play with kids because they can't go wrong, right? If you have kids or grandkids who want to make something at your house, especially as a gift, it's a great way to play. And then they end up with something useful and they feel like they've accomplished something, and they just can't go wrong. Nothing is bad about it. So some fun things that you can do with powders are to add ground up herbs into them, powdered herbs. So an example is pink rose petals. These grind up really nicely, so if you have roses, you can dry them by spreading them out on a screen or on a table with newspaper and putting it on a back porch where there's good air circulation, where it's shady, or putting it up in an attic if there's good air circulation and it's shady. And they'll dry, and when they dry to a crisp, then you can put them in a coffee grinder or any sort of blender and grind them up to a powder. So that's an option. You can also put nettle powder in, and stinging nettles are a great herb. I use them all the time. Usually as a tea is my favorite way to have them, but they're edible. You can make all sorts of yummy dishes with them. I like to put these in honey, nettle powder and honey, and it makes sort of a paste. It gets really thick, but it's nice to spread onto toast and biscuits. You can also mix it in your powder, but it will turn it green, which can be fun at Halloween. And then this is hibiscus powder. It's an example of just another great, beautiful flower that's been dried and powdered. And this gets kind of glittery. So this is really fun for kids, especially girls, because they can, it's like a glitter. Once they add it to the powder, it's a lot of fun. So those are all options when you want to make your own. Today, I think I'm gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna add lavender essential oil, so we'll have a lavender body powder. And it's kind of counterintuitive. You would think that you wouldn't add liquid straight to your powder, but actually, if you do it by the drop and you stir in frequently, it gets mixed in really well. So that was about a 1/4 teaspoon dropped in, and then I'm going to stir and mix it around. And smell, add another, and you just keep going until you reach the scent, the fragrance that you want. By the way, this is the same process for making bath salts. If you have access to Dead Sea salts or even just Epsom salts, you pour them into your pot like this, and you sprinkle in essential oils and some baking soda and vegetable glycerin if you want, just little bits at a time, and your bath salts will absorb it. And then you can package it up and give it as a gift. So I've probably done a 3/4 of a teaspoon to a teaspoon of essential oil in here. And I'm going to keep going because I want it to smell a little bit stronger. Would anybody like to come help me spoon these into some bags for you guys to take home? If you would like, once you get your bag, if you want to come add any of these other powders to your powder, you're welcome to. So maybe just one to start with, one fat one, yeah, or two of those to go into each one. Okay. You may end up adding more. Let's do two. And then these
Put it in the whole movie.
Maybe you can put the labels on while she fills.
There you go. Spray the wind.
So pretty. So while they're filling, yeah, this is just a powder that you can sprinkle on your body when you're hot. Baby bottoms.
Could you put it in your hair?
You could put it in your hair if you have very oily hair, but it gets kind of cakey. It's really not, it's more for the skin. But when I teach herbal medicine, I really like to teach that it's A, wonderful and fun, B, it's easy, it's also useful because these are either nutrients that are food-like that we can enjoy as a food, or they're medicinal, they're helpful for respiratory and cardiovascular and digestive issues, endocrine system, hormonal system. Herbs are so vastly helpful, and there's such a versatility. But I really want to encourage you to go out and experiment and try, because it's very hard to go wrong when you're making honeys and vinegars and teas and powders and salts. It's a very fun thing. Especially if you're growing your own herbs, it's very rewarding, and you're not spending much money, and you can end up with some really wonderful creations. So if you guys would like to come up and get a bag, you're free to add some other powders into it if you would like, or just take it as it is, and I hope you enjoy it.
Real quickly, I just want to give a little background on how I met Nathaniel Mulcahy. This is kind of a biochar 101 and a lot of other things. I have not heard him speak, so, but I've read the blogs, I've been on his website. This is Phragmites. This is considered an invasive species here, and through the Edie Foundation, we were able to kind of conduct a little study that's ongoing right now. Emma Greenbeach is actually in charge of it. And one of the things is that these are kind of like a nutrient sponge, a green sponge, and they soak up a lot of nitrogen. And I happened to read some paper in Spain where they harvested this stuff and took it away out of the watershed, and it helped reduce the nitrogen level. So I thought, wow, that's really great, let's look into that. I happened to be at a shellfish meeting, and Nathaniel mentioned Phragmites and biochar in the same sentence, and I was kind of like, okay, this is something. And we've talked since, and this is where this is coming from. Nathaniel has a really incredible bio. I don't know, I'm not going to go into everything, but he's pretty much an engineer, an ecologist. His company, World Stove, has created self-sustaining jobs in 13 countries. Through World Stove, Mulcahy has worked and helped create one of the top 10 of the social good by his company in 2011 by Trendsetter. So he's a pretty neat guy. And I don't want to waste your time. I'd rather have you listen to him. So please welcome Nathaniel.
If it's okay with you, if you can all hear me, I'll just walk around a bit and not have to just cover by the microphones. So, thank you for having me. I've already been told that my tie marks me as an off-islander. There is no funeral, and I'm not trying to sell anything. I was at the UN the other week, presenting on just this, and during Climate Week, and with heads of state and heads of industry. And while somebody asked me if it was a funeral because of the tie, one of the things that we do have to worry about is the carbon levels in this world. CO2 levels are now well past where they should be. And in this room, I'm assuming that a majority of us have heard about climate change and perhaps its correlation with CO2 levels in the atmosphere. Show of hands, yay or nay? Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That's good. Well, have you seen that Morgan Freeman film, that 3-minute film that came out for Climate Week? So get on YouTube. Absolutely worth watching. He's got a great narration voice, but aside from his fantastic narration voice, he says, there is hope. There is this wonderful thing. There is a chance for a better future. And he drones on with this fantastic, exquisite music of a voice. And you think, wow, okay, it's not all doom and gloom. He says we could have windmills, we could have solar farms, we could be charging our cars on electric and have zero emissions. And all of that is true. But it overlooks one critical thing. And when I saw Morgan Freeman's film, I thought, great, it was nice to hear something positive and not all this negative, which really is counterproductive. People stop listening after a while. The one thing it lacked was one critical factor. So if by some miracle, by a wave of a Phragmites wand or something, we were able to stop all CO2 emissions today, immediately, we say, everybody's riding bicycles. No more airplanes, no more factories, no more coal factories, no more coal, no more burning fossil fuels of any kind, and we stop today. It doesn't fix the problem. CO2 levels have already entered a chain reaction and will continue to rise from good scientific estimates from between 100 to 1,000 years. We have such a high level of CO2 in the atmosphere now that even turning it off, we've set off a chain reaction. So even if we live our most ecological, most sustainable lifestyles possible, we're still doomed. We can still wear our funeral tie because it's not a good situation. Dr. James Lovelock published a great paper a while ago when asked by a reporter, is there no hope? Is there absolutely no hope? And he said, no, there's a chance. People wake up and they take agricultural waste, turn it into charcoal, and bury it, then there's a chance. So this is the chance. This is what I'm talking about. Right now, I'm assuming everybody in this room composts, and composting is great. It's a good way to get nutrients back into the soil. At a home scale, composting is great. It is sustainable and it's good for the environment. If you start to scale up and go to these industrial composting systems, the industrial composting systems release enormous amount of methane, and methane is bad. 27 times worse than CO2 for the atmosphere. It's got a shorter half-life, but it's still a really, really bad thing to be introducing. The other problem with composting, to some extent, is it's the carbon cycle. It's very natural, right? So plants take CO2, they convert it into biomass. When the biomass decays, the CO2 goes back into the atmosphere. It's a very normal loop, and closed-loop systems are great. The problem is because we've burnt a lot of the really sequestered biomass, which was fossil fuels, we have more CO2 in the atmosphere than the plants are currently absorbing. We're putting out more than the plants that will decay. So one of the ways to bring this back, and Rick was absolutely right, this is a great nutrient absorber, but plants are fantastic and the best CO2 absorbers. So by taking plants and doing what plants normally do, they absorb the CO2 from the atmosphere. Right now, this is sequestered CO2. If I leave this in this room, it's going to stay CO2 that is not going back into the atmosphere. If, however, I allow it to decay, 6 months from now, and that's a very short time frame, that CO2 is back in the air. If, however, I were to pyrolyze it, and by pyrolyze it, that means you heat it past the temperature of combustion in an atmosphere devoid of oxygen. I see a confused face. Question? Feel free to interrupt it. Because I think dialogues work better. Yes?
So basically, you're doing is you're making coal that took millions of years, you're taking this and you're putting it back in the ground, and that's what you say, and you should never burn it.
Brilliant. That's exactly right. But it gets an added bonus. So right now, if I were to take this and pelletize it and turn it into these, as I've done, and then I cook with it, or I heat with it, and turn it into these, this is the coal that you're talking about, except it's called biochar. And biochar, by tuning the stoves and the pyrolysis process and the pelletizing process carefully, you get a valuable byproduct, which is not just sequestered carbon. And this is carbon that's very, very stable. It'll stay for years, millennia even. But as islanders, this is something that you should really appreciate more than off-islanders, because what this does is it prevents runoff. Nutrient runoff is killing a lot of the shorelines. It's causing a lot of problems. Our studies have also shown how using this we can stabilize seashores. We've prevented coastal erosions. Sand dunes normally retreat landward with sea level rise. With this, we've been able to get sand dunes to move seaward. So without the introduction of concrete seawalls, which have any number of problems associated with them, we can have the shoreline heal itself and move forward rather than retreating. So there are a lot of really big advantages here. In Senegal, we were able to grow tomatoes in the desert using 1/10 of the water that is used in loamy soils by the introduction of biochar into the plants. So it means saving water, it means saving nutrients, it means restoring ecosystems. So as a species, we're awful. We really are. We've spent millions of years destroying everything. This is our chance to actually do something to fix our errors. And this is how my company does it. So in 2009, my company was recognized as the world's first carbon negative company. We sequester more CO2 than we produce, more than we use. From that, we then went off and did an offshoot, which became offsets. And so those offsets, we have a unique business model, hard for large businesses to understand, which is we keep zero profit. I'm very lazy in terms of math, and to be able to say 0 on one side, 100 on the other, makes the math really, really, really easy. What we do is we go from village to village, from town to town, from island to island, and work on getting people to set up their own companies locally. It creates local jobs, it gets rid of the local biomass, and it attunes the biochar to the local soil and plant needs. Because the biochar that you're going to want for your pawpaw orchard is going to be very, very different than that for your cassava field. So bit by bit, you can tune it and be locally. So like the slow food movement that you see next door here, this is slow food for energy. This is local. This is the locavores equivalent of energy. Now earlier I was talking, when we're setting up here, at how appropriate this room is for this talk. Right here I have a fireplace. Wonderful, romantic, nice thing. How many of you cook on one of these? If I were to close this chimney, how many of you would cook on it? There are 3.2 billion people a day who cook on an open fire, indoors, all over the world. That's half the world's population. What does that mean? Well, in terms of ecologies, it means massive deforestation. And the reason that's massive deforestation is this combustion here is at most, if you're really, really careful, about 12% combustion efficiency for an open fire. At 12%, I explained to our expert here, if you were a school student and you got 12% on every exam that you took, how would your parents think of you? That's the grade that half this world's population gets, and it's not that they have other options. This is the most common available fuel. What does that mean? How many of you have seen the little red labels on people's lapels or pink labels on people's lapels? Show hands. That's, AIDS, it's a horrible thing. Breast cancer is a terrible thing. The number of deaths annually caused by cooking on open fires or traditional cooking in the world exceeds the total number of deaths of AIDS and breast cancer combined. 400,000 a year. Gone. These are enormous figures. Millions and millions and millions of unnecessary deaths, and for the most part, these deaths are women, because they do most of the cooking, and very young children, because they can't be away from their mom. So, small children and women. 400,000 deaths a year. How do we fix that? Well, let's try and fix many, many problems all at the same time. Let's try and fix the lack of nutrition. Let's fix the deforestation. Let's fix health issues. Let's fix lack of jobs. And let's do it all at the same time. And together, not as a company, but as a global community, let every individual household in town and village work to reduce the global CO2 levels. So the way we do that, we go from village to village, and first we assess the locally available waste biomass. And what I consider waste, somebody else may not consider waste, so it takes some time. But Keith over here has been studying the island, and he has a long list of what is waste on Martha's Vineyard. There's a lot. How much hardwood do you guys have?
I don't know the numbers.
No, but
a large amount of hardwood, wood chips, sawdust, horse bedding.
Okay.
Hardwood, paper.
Great.
The numbers are very large. We're looking at that site more for composting than burning.
Okay, so if you were to take that and we convert each one of those tons, and there may be tens or hundreds or thousands of tons of material, which is an expense, especially with the new laws in Massachusetts about composting, because organic waste can't go to landfills. You could create local jobs for turning that into this, right? If instead of having cook stoves, and these are cook stoves for developing nations, we were to take those and do the more intensive versions, this is actually from our home heating unit, and do the home heating version of these things, that means you would be getting rid of a waste source, you'd be taking that and turning it into free municipal energy. Perhaps you could have that if there are people who are low income in the area who can afford heat, and with the oil prices going up and subsidized heating systems budgets being eliminated, there's some real need in this country. If you think about Massachusetts alone, Massachusetts in 2012, there were 289,000 households, so 289,000 times 5, that's the average, for number of people who reduced the number of meals they ate to 1 meal a day during the winter because they could not afford to heat their homes. So we're looking at over 1 million people in Massachusetts who, because of an energy shortage and the cost of energy, can't eat. Yes? That's a great question. And so it's scalable. So to give you a sense of that, did everybody hear the question? No. How much heat does the stove put out? So this is a stove that is designed for cooking for an average family. It can be scaled down. This, by the way, our local group in Rwanda makes. But this is also a stove, right? This is the internal component of a very, very large stove. This can heat 3,000 square feet. This can cook for a family of 5. This is great for camping, right? It's scalable. You can make it as large or as small as necessary. So if you have, say, your town hall that you want to heat, you can make one large enough to heat a town hall.
I understand everything that you're saying. Can you explain a little bit what we could do at a local level in order to make those, and then what is the process after you make that bag, turn it into like charcoal pieces, and then how do you physically take those charcoal pieces and use them to protect the shore? What could we do to protect the shore using them?
It's a fantastic series of questions. Pretty much, you've mapped out the rest of the talk, so thank you. So, did everybody hear how can we do this locally? That's really what I do, is try and get people excited, get them interested, and then we come back and teach you how to do it. You set up your own factories. So, what do we do locally? So, if everybody were to replace their charcoal grills or their gas grills with a biochar producing grill that's produced on the island. So say Martha's Vineyard sets up their own barbecue grill, carbon negative factory. You make something like this, but a cooking version for grilling. Already, on a local basis, you would be sequestering quite a lot of carbon. To put it into perspective, if you were to cook one cookout type meal a day on your barbecue grill produced here on Martha's Vineyard, and that produces biochar every time you cook your cookout. If you did one a day, the average household would produce enough biochar to plant between 2,000 and 6,000 trees a year. So that's 2,000 to 3,000 trees just by grilling. So get rid of the charcoal grill, switch to this, you're not getting rid of a carbon, you're sequestering carbon. That, for the most immediate sense on how you can do it locally, that would be it. Looking into the distant future, if people like Rick and Keith helped organize a committee and you got some funding to be able to set up home heating units, you could actually start producing pellets locally using the waste that Keith has been documenting. We'd come and teach you how to make pellets, we'd set up a factory. You really need a room only about this size to produce all the pellets that you would need for Martha's Vineyard. That's not such a huge amount of space. It would create local jobs producing the pellets, it would get rid of a waste source, and it would provide a low cost to zero cost fuel for islanders. If then, instead of using fuel oil or propane to heat your house, or electric, which is really ridiculously expensive, you use the pellets produced with waste material from Martha's Vineyard, at the end of the heating season, each household would have tons of charcoal. And the way this counts as CO2, 80% of this is carbon. So if you take 80%, take the total weight, multiply it by 0.8, then you multiply it by 3.67, that is the weight of CO2 that you've sequestered. So you can measure, Martha's Vineyard could say, we as an island have sequestered X number of tons this year. We have done this contribution to bringing down the global CO2 levels. And the reason I keep mentioning islands is at the UN talk, one of the really neat things that I met is I met the Prime Minister of Aruba. Another island, a little warmer, but still an island. The relevance is islands have a unique ability to do things that non-islands can't. They're cut off. they have a problem with what comes in and what goes out, which makes them very isolated, kind of like space capsules, except not moving and in the water. What Aruba did when the Kyoto Accord came out 13 years ago is they said, okay, we are going to be 100% self-sustaining energy-wise by 2020. Turns out they're going to succeed by the end of 2015. So they met their goal. Now they're talking about, well, if we are now 100% self-sufficient energy-wise, can we start bringing down our CO2 levels? Can we be a carbon negative country? Islands can really do that because they're insular. They're not tied to a lot of things. And so you can really map what comes in and what comes out because everything's measured. And we really owe an enormous debt of thanks to Keith for documenting all this, because the hardest thing to do is find out just how much you have. Once you know how much biomass you have, you know what potential you have to do this. So let me get this started. So while I'm doing this, I'll pass a couple things around.
Where's your closest pellet factory?
Closest pellet factory is, they're all out of the country. These, well, I'll leave the lids on. You can open them and sniff them. These we produced in a factory in Senegal using Phragmites. In 1985, Senegal dammed up the river between Mauritania and Senegal. It's this nice long river. It was tidal for 250 miles inland. By damming it up, it went from a brackish system to a freshwater system, and the Phragmites exploded. So it's an enormous problem. It destroyed the fishing area. They actually did it to save water, but it turns out they started wasting water because of all the transpiration from the leaves of the Phragmites. So that was our focus. By focusing on what's a waste, you get rid of a problem and create a free energy source. So in Senegal, we worked with the local people and taught them how to make pellets using Phragmites. These pellets, however, we produced in Rwanda. Rwanda doesn't have Phragmites as a problem, but they have large forests of eucalyptus that were planted to stop deforestation. Eucalyptus is a neat tree, however, it sheds an enormous amount of bark, which is a huge fire problem, creates issues for forest fires. It's an enormous biomass problem. So without cutting down a single tree, by just harvesting that which is shed annually between the eucalyptus, the tifa, and the banana, we were able to make these pellets, which actually have 15% more energy than the tifa because of the oil contents of the eucalyptus, and they smell really, really nice when you eat them.
How do you get from Phragmites to what's in the vial?
You take these, you run them through. The question is, how do you get from this to this? And the answer is a two-stage process. You run it through, first through a hammer mill, kind of chop it up. Then you run it through a pellet mill, which takes these. You're about my age, so you probably remember the Play-Doh Fuzzy Pumper Barbershop.
I heard about it from my mother.
All right. So the Play-Doh Fuzzy Pumper Barbershop was, you'd have this little Play-Doh guy sitting on a barber chair, and you'd shove a piece of Play-Doh in the bottom of the chair, and you'd push down on the handle, and this guy's hair would grow because it was all Play-Doh. It's essentially the same thing, except instead of Play-Doh, we're using Phragmites or eucalyptus or garden waste. Yes?
Where in the process are you taking out the moisture?
Fantastic question. So, moisture content is a key issue here. One of the nice things about pelletizing it is you get uniform density, uniform moisture content, which makes combustion and pyrolysis very, very easy, and it helps you regulate the final product. In the moisture content, you can either, if it weren't a day like today, sun drying for a week is usually sufficient. Because remember, if you over dry it, then there is not enough moisture to go through the system and it binds up. As it compresses, what's happening is nothing more than a lot of friction. You're taking a large object, shoving it through a very tiny hole. The amount of friction that's going on there causes a high temperature rise. The heat causes the lignates within the biomass to plasticize, and that's why if you look at the pellets, they have sort of a shiny coating. That's not that it's coated with anything, it's just the lignits is plasticized, and that's what binds it together. Yes?
I apologize if I missed this, but we have a pellet stove Right? Which, from my understanding, is the pellets that you get for that kind of stove are primarily made from sawdust.
Right.
Could this be used in that type of stove?
It cannot. And the reason is when you buy, it's a great question. Did everybody hear the question? They have a pellet stove. They want to know, could we use Phragmites pellets in their home pellet stove? And the answer is no. And the reason is when you buy a bag of pellets, you should look at the back of it. Rick, can I ask you to help? Sure. Just while I'm talking, if you just pour those in there till about that level. My kind of white. So you should see the sequin dress. All right. That said,
What's the final moisture content?
so my final moisture content is less than 15%. But going back to your question, when you buy your bag of pellets, do you notice that one of the things that's on the instructions of the pellets is it tells you the ash content. The pellets with a higher ash content cost less because they're lousy pellets. It's very well done, Ben, thanks. The problem with Phragmites is, like a lot of grasses, it has a very high mineral content. That translates to an incredibly high ash content. The higher the mineral content, the higher the ash content. If you have a high ash content, it's going to destroy your stove. You'll get clinkers, it'll jam up, it'll cause a lot of corrosion. One of the nice things about pyrolysis is that it is not combusting. The fluid dynamics of the way the stove's designed allow the stove to heat up the biomass without oxygen. That releases the low carbon radicals. Those volatiles come out, and then you burn just that. So to give you a really, really, really simple example.
Question is how do you heat it up?
I'm getting there. So, okay, that's burning, right? That's not burning. You see all this white? That's fuel. This stove burns just the white. And what's left behind is what you see now on the ends of these matches. That's just the charcoal that's left behind. It's not burnt long enough to burn the carbon. So the way you heat it up is you get the stove started. I'm going to put just a little more. Mystery of mysteries. So it has an inner and outer chamber. The inner chamber heats up. It creates a chimney effect between the inner and the outer chamber. That causes the air between the two chambers to draw up. At the bottom, there's a series of very small holes about here. Those act as venturis when the air goes by it, which causes the air from the center to get drawn down, which creates a vacuum. The air passing through the flames is drawn slowly enough through the flames to consume the oxygen. So within just a few minutes, the inner chamber has no oxygen and the pyrolysis starts. Since it's heated past the point of combustion, but there's no oxygen on the inside, it's then at that point a chain reaction is set off and it continues to be self-sustaining until you've gone through your fuel.
Does it stink?
You'll tell me in a moment.
So you leave it on all the time then?
Yeah.
This isn't the kind of instance you throw charcoal in and start it and the thing gets going, you just keep it going.
Just like a pellet stove.
It's not consuming any oxygen.
No, it is consuming oxygen. It's consuming oxygen in the flame. What it's doing is it's taking the combustion and taking it away from the biomass. So I'm just burning the smoke and heating the biomass to release more smoke, but not giving it enough oxygen to combust inside. This is called pyrolysis. P-Y-R-O, like pyromaniac, right? Pyrolysis.
It's pretty damp here.
It is.
We need a bigger batch.
So, right now, we actually have true combustion. So Nancy, you can explain what you can see so people. Right. So this is
a little bit bigger.
This is actually just combusting. So right now we have open air combustion. What's happening here at this point is no different than what's happening here, right? Because all I have is the biomass is starting to ignite. The reason I do this is the starting process. That's to get the inner chamber heated up enough to then start the pyrolysis process and create that chimney effect between the inner and outer chambers. Just one more match. Now, last night, my wife and I had a great ferry boat ride on the steamship groups, Steamship Authority. So what I'm doing now, you can see that this hole is smaller than that hole. And it's smaller than the inner chamber too. So it's called a constrictor. All I'm doing is tightening down this to prevent oxygen from getting in. And once this gets heated, right now you see the occasional wisp of smoke. Once this gets heated, then it'll kick into pyrolysis and the flame will go from the biomass, it'll move up and just start being at the very top ring. So last night, we took the ferry boat over, which was a great ride. I really like boats. And my wife and I, following Rick's suggestion, had chowder, which was delicious. And to my delight, the ferry had these. So my wife had chili, you can tell from the reddish hue, and I had chowder. And it came with this. Has anyone really taken a look at these before? You heard about compostable plastics?
Yeah.
This is all vegetable material. I could take this, once this is established, throw it in there, and it too will turn into biochar. So we'll let that continue to heat. Center that. A little squashed on the transport.
Can you put those spoons in your wood stove?
You can't, because what they'll do is they'll melt and burn and gunk up your grate. Can you put the spoons in your wood stove? And the answer is you can't, because like the pellet stove has to have low mineral, your wood stove can't have things melting and burning all over the place. But remember, in here I'm not actually burning it, I'm just heating it up past the point of combustion. So at this point, this is an alternative to this kind of cooking, right? It's warm. Now, what happens is since this is getting heated, the two vials that you saw earlier that got passed around will get turned into this. And if you don't mind dirtying up your hands, put a little in your hand and feel what it feels like.
How often do you have to recharge that to leave it on?
Okay, so this is just a cook stove. If you've got the home heating unit, it's like a pellet stove, there's a continual feed. And so you just put in your big hopper and keep going.
Oh, okay.
Right, this is a batch-driven cook stove.
Sounds like it's going to take a great deal of fuel, and we heard that, yeah, we've got, we all dispose of paper and cardboard, but do we have enough fuel to create something like that that would make us self-sustaining at a local level?
That is a fantastic question. So, did everybody hear the question? He said, sounds like it's going to use a lot of fuel. Do we have enough fuel to figure out if we can do this in a self-sustaining way on a local level? So, the question is great, because let's talk back to the efficiency of this. This is a 12% combustion efficiency. In its worst, absolute worst operation, which is right now during startup, this is a 93% combustion efficiency. So I need a lot less fuel to be able to do that. That helps a great deal. There's one woman by the name of Kalipa. Of all the programs that I've done, she impressed me the most. I go into, she's a Pool, or a Fulani. It's a nomadic people who live between Senegal and Mauritania. They live in little houses made out of bent sticks that look kind of like the Native American long huts, except in a very small form. And I demonstrated the stove in her house, and that's where we were making it with Phragmites, and there were a couple things she told me about her life. So the first off, in that area, which is now flat desert, and if you go to our Facebook page, you can look, they're really amazing photos. It's no longer a desert, no longer a forest, it's just desert because of all the deforestation due to cooking. She now in the morning walks 2.5 hours in one direction to gather wood, 2.5 hours back, so a 5-hour round trip just to get the wood, and then the water is in the opposite direction, 2 hours. So at the end of the day, she's done 9 hours of work to be able to get the fuel and the water, to boil the water, to cook her food, and clean the kids. That's her daily existence. I was showing the stove in her house, and I asked her, we had a pot of water on it, we were cooking a small meal there, and I asked Mrs. Ba, how long will this go? And normally people, you know, it's a little bit of a parlor trick that I have. They see this, they weigh it, they know how much a piece of wood weighs, and they say, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then I get to be the great showman and say, no, much more. This woman absolutely blew me away. This woman who carried every ounce of fuel she uses by walking, put her hands on the stove. Then she put the hands over the flame. Then she felt the pellets. She said, 2.5 hours. I mean, it's like absolutely blew me. Dead on, spot on. You know, this is so. There's your combustion expert. But the fact is going back to your question, the efficiency levels of a 93% combustion efficiency are much, much, much higher. Now, this has been burning for what? 20 minutes? 10 minutes? We could go another 2 hours easily. Boil a pot of water, cook things. I mean, one of the things that I've seen while we were setting up for the talk was everybody here was sampling pawpaws. I saw you seaweed, cookies, little bits of cake. The local vor concept is really, really exciting, and it's sustainable. This is nothing more than the energy equivalent of the local vor movement. Yeah.
From a local practical level again, you showed us a bunch of pellets from different types of trees. If we were to set up a local facility, can that local facility process different Phragmites? Can it process paper? Can it process cardboard? Can it process sawdust? Or do you need a facility set up for each particular fuel type that you process?
Okay, so his question was, do we need to have a separate facility for each of the different fuel types? So the vials that you had actually were mixes. This one is just straight up Phragmites. So that's that. The problem is, I don't think that Martha's Vineyard, as terrible a problem as Phragmites is, has enough to really make your heat needs. This, however, is a mixture. And so what we do is we set up the pilot program and do a fuel study to see what's available locally. And then at that point we can say, all right, here's the recipe that Martha's Vineyard pellets need to be. So it may be 10% cardboard. It may be 20% animal bedding. It may be 6% Phragmites. But there'll be some optimal recipe, and then what we do is not only set up the factory for that specific mixture, and there's going to be variation. There are tolerance levels of that. But then tune your stoves to be optimized for that specific fuel. So, like your home pellet stove.
You have to design a room like this that's going to contain different types of fuels. You're going to put a recipe together for the fuel.
Right.
And then you're going to design a unique stove that would work best here on Martha's Vineyard, just like we do with these other.
So it's exactly, except it's not the complete redesign. For example, This is the bottom of one of these stoves. Okay? I'll pass these around. If you look, they're slightly different. This one here is the one for the Rwandan pellets. This one here is for the Senegalese pellets. So there are slight geometric changes that are required, and then you're ready to go. So it's not that you have to reinvent everything from scratch. They're just little tweaks that needed to be done.
Okay, as we decide that we're going to read less from the paper and read less on the books and read less electronically, and then our fuel mix changes.
Right.
How bad would that affect or the efficiency of whatever it is that we would have at the time? You're going to design something now that says you have so much paper, cardboard,
Right.
and everything else.
You put in tolerance levels. You put in tolerance levels. So if, for example, the banana crop in Rwanda is seasonal, the waste from banana trees is seasonal, the eucalyptus waste is constant. So we made the one which we knew would not be constant a less dominant factor in the equation. So you look at this, we sit down as a community, we say, all right, Keith has these numbers, let's sit down. What are we going to be guaranteed to have all the time? Well, we know at the end of the gardening season, everybody's got all these dead tomato plants. That we can count on, but that's only going to be every August. Okay? We're going to get waves of cardboard in the beginning of the year because there's all that stuff coming in to bring in the tourist stuff. And we've got all this packaging that we've got to get rid of. So we know we're going to get a big peak of cardboard in May, just to get our supplies in. We know we're going to get grass clippings year-round. And speaking of grass clippings, to put things into perspective in a really, really exciting way, the average American lawn, New England's a little wonky because they're older and smaller yards, but the average American lawn is 1/3 of an acre. If you were to mow your lawn of 1/3 of an acre once a week during the growing season, so May through October, and saved all those clippings and brought it to, instead of the community pellet mill, right? So like the old grist mills used to be in New England, where not everybody could afford to have their own grist mill, but there was a community grist mill and you brought your wheat there, ground it, they would get a percentage of your wheat in return for the use of the mill. If you did the same thing with pellets, with 1/3 of an acre, you would be producing, how much smell is there?
No smell.
Okay.
Very pretty little flame.
Okay. If you were to do 1/3 of an acre with weekly clippings from May through October, you would have the energy equivalent of the amount of energy used by the average New England home every winter to heat. That means every single house in the United States would be energy self-sufficient. Yes?
Can you say a little bit about pyrolysis process and what the volatile dependent burning actually is, and then what the final product, because the final product is what hydrocarbon, CO2,
right,
and H2O, and then
right,
nasty stuff that we don't like.
Okay.
So I'm curious about what the emissions are from this, but I'm also curious what are the compounds that are actually burning?
Okay, so his question is, what are the compounds that are actually burning? What are the emissions profiles? So I have the unique advantage that all of my stoves have been tested by the EPA, so I can tell you exactly what the emissions profiles are. One of the great pleasures when we went down to North Carolina, we've got this great big test facility. And actually, can I borrow you and bring you up here a second?
What part of North Carolina?
It's in the Research Triangle area. No, because it was your question.
Okay.
So, no, Rick's not fired. He's got the sequin dress. So, in any event, pretty flame, huh? So, the test facility is set up for cook stoves. When we brought our stoves there and EPA set up their test equipment, they actually wrote back and said, can we test it again? It registered too low for us to measure. Because they were set for one set of parameters that we didn't even hit the lower bar on. So that was a very satisfying moment. We've since had it tested multiple times by multiple other labs, and we have emissions profiles for a well-tuned and well-operated stove that are comparable to a propane stove. So, and that's using biomass. Since you asked the question, and don't singe your beard, but I'm going to ask you to stick your face over this and breathe. Okay, what do you smell?
It's a very faint combustion.
Right, mostly heat.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're burning most of the things that are coming out. This flame here is about 50% carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide, well, people say, oh, you'll suffocate. It's actually a really good fuel.
That's what you're burning, or that's the emission?
That's what I'm burning.
You're burning CO.
I'm burning CO, 50% CO, about hydrogen, 40-some% hydrogen, and about 3% methane. And then there's some extra stuff that make up to the 100%. But right now, 50% of this is CO. So essentially, I've got a CO hydrogen stove. The reason I burn those first is those are the least stable things. And so as you heat something close to the temperature combustion, those get released first. Carbon is very, very stable. And so that's the last thing to burn. But because if you look underneath, there is only black happening.
There's only what happening?
Black. You only see black. There's no glowing embers, right? No. No.
But at the end, are you going to have that black stuff in the heat?
Yeah, isn't that neat? So I'm actually gonna tear up. Since I've been mentioning these things, and I want people to question, you're a fairly well-researched group. So here is an interview with James Lovelock, which discusses how you have to bury it. People who say there's not enough waste biomass in the world. This starts to document it. These are nice peer review papers. I've also included a copy of one of our peer review papers of how you can take this material and start dosing it to restore your shorelines or improve your soils or improve your gardens. But let me go on to this next demo for you. These are here available for you guys.
Are those on your website too?
They are not. That would be a great thing. We should put them up there. The website's very easy. It's just worldstove.com. But if I can have my assistant come back. So, I'll bring the water here too. Right, you're going to be the eyes for the rest of the group. But if I take this now, this room has oxygen, fortunately, because we'd be all dead otherwise. By placing it in there, it ignites. So this is combustion. If you look how there's a glowing red part on the side, right? That's advancing pyrolysis. So it's a flaming combustion front, which moves on to pyrolysis. And then what's left behind is gray, not black. That's ash. And you can smell that much more than we've smelled the stove, which has been burning longer. So now I'm going to take this and place it underneath the flame. Just drop it down. I'd like you to look down and be the eyes and ears for this group and tell them if this too gets a glowing red ember on it, or what happens. Okay?
It's just turning black. There's no red flame.
Any smoky wisps near it?
No.
Okay, so you're not seeing it. What's happening is it's releasing the volatile hydrocarbons first. Those are being burned. And the reason this is clean is what happens is this is the inner chamber and this would be the outer chamber. What's happening is the smoke is not going up, it's going down. It gets brought through the charcoal, it gets brought through the biomass, that serves as a scrubber. Then it passes up between the two chambers, and the cleaned, scrubbed gases are what are being combusted in the flame. So it is cleaning its own emissions.
Charcoal.
It's a charcoal filter. Yes?
Well, getting a charcoal filter, you're going to use, explain how it protects the have a stove that could replace the stove that I have at home that burns propane, and could we make enough of that so that we could at least, while we're making this great charcoal, cook the food at home, the meals every day?
I would love to do that. That is a great goal to do right now. I've been focusing mostly on developing nations. So
that's what I thought. I mean, it's a great idea.
I
think it would be good for us to make that and learn more about, once that charcoal filter product is made, how we could use it to help absorb some of the stuff that we produce here.
Right.
But I know we can't do that all here.
I can't do it all right now, but we can eventually. I've got 5 minutes left, so let me wrap it up quickly. So we've talked about ecosystem restoration, we've talked about fuel poverty, we've talked about increasing crop yields, lack of water, all of these things. One of the things that's happening in Haiti, which is one of the countries we're lucky enough to work in, we've heard about the cholera outbreak. Cholera is a real problem. Since it was reintroduced into Haiti during the earthquake relief efforts, 6,000 people have died in Haiti alone because of the reintroduction of cholera. What a lot of the humanitarian groups did to try and stop the spread of cholera was distribute clean water. They said everybody needs to drink X number of liters a day. We will give that water to people so we know they're drinking safe water and not cholera-infected water. The problem is they're drinking the clean water, but they're washing their hands, their dishes in the cholera-infected water. So even if they're drinking the clean water, they're still being exposed to cholera constantly. With that in mind, and with the fact that in addition to fuel poverty, there's water poverty in the world, I invented this version of the stove. This is the newest version of our stove. This is called the Lucia Clearwater. It works the same way as this, but it does one little bit more. Every time you cook one meal, it purifies 12 liters of water. So that's why this stove also has a faucet. And then because I like style, and because I like espresso pots, in addition to having a very nice big surface for my big pots, I incorporated a pot stand for tiny, tiny espresso pots. And the reason it's called the Lucia Clearwater, this is called the Lucia stove, named after my dear dog, who's no longer here, but Lucia, look it up, it's a great story. The Clearwater is the Lucia Clearwater because we have the great privilege of having partnered now with Pete Seeger's organization. And that's why the Clearwater is on the front of the boat here. Pete Seeger was a real advocate for clean water all over the world. We're producing clean water all over the world, and his boat is going on and marching that forward. So this was endorsed by Pete's daughter, and it's one of our real accomplishments from this year. So to just close this up, I'm going to ask us all to take a trip outside. Okay? So this has been burning now, how long?
Half hour. 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
Okay. Let's go take a walk. First off, notice I can hold the stove that's been on for half an hour. It's a bit both.
Okay.
So while we're waiting for everybody to gather, if anyone wants to sniff it. Pretty flame, no smell, no smoke.
Is this adaptable?
Yep, just tap it.
Thank you. Is this adaptable to using manure as fuel?
Yes, in Tanzania we use goat droppings, which conveniently come out pre-pelletized.
That's great.
Yeah. You just leave them in the sun for 2 days and you can use goat droppings. So, Another nice feature is the number of children who get burned in Africa because of bad fires and kerosene stoves is quite high. Here you can see a nice important safety feature is the fact that the stove is cooler to touch. You can see very little smoke. Those of you who want to sniff it, this is your last chance. Here she comes. Pretty flame, nice sniff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And I want to give you a sense of how much time we could have still cooked with this, or gone into the next room there and all those delicious things we could have cooked if we had done this. The black part is biochar, and the pellets we could have continued to use or reuse the next time. Another neat thing, there's a lot of blue in this flame which you can't see because it's the same frequency as the sky. So if you look now, you can actually see the charcoal very nicely before I put it out underneath the flame. No glowing embers.
Somebody else
On more complicated models, yeah, but this one is done to keep the cost as low as possible. For people who $50 a day. But we adjusted for the temperatures. Actually, it was a really good question. Deb asked, is there a way to regulate the temperature? So we have more complicated models. They're more expensive. What we do, and as a foodie, one of the real joys of my job is I get to learn all the local cooking. So what I do is not only adjust the stove to the local biomass, I adjust it to the local cuisine. So a Lucia stove in Ethiopia will burn for 40 minutes at a very high temperature because that's what their cuisine most needs. The same Lucia stove in Zambia will be tuned to go for a low temperature for about 6 hours because there's mostly soups that are slow cooked. So you adjust to the local cuisine, and so I get to be a foodie and a pyro. It's a really good life.
How does that equate to BTU? I mean,
well, it depends on what the cooking needs are. You know, one of the mistakes that a lot of stove programs have is they say, the faster it boils the water, the better the stove. Well, as a cook, that's not the case. What if I'm making something really delicate? You know, so you do it based on what is the most common cuisine. And if you want more adaptability, I have the real privilege of having a wife who's an anthropologist. If you don't respect the local cuisine and the local traditions, it's not going to be adopted. So why would I use a stove that's super efficient, but I can't cook what is part of my identity? It's not useful to me. And in the refugee situations, when my family has been killed, I've been displaced, I have no longer my possessions, one of the few things which is truly still mine are my traditions. So why would I take something that won't let me do that?
what does it cost a Zambian to buy one of these stoves?
Oh, fantastic question. Okay. The programs that are most successful are the ones where people are having to buy their fuels, right? So what we do in setting up in the local areas is we go in and say, what is the local daily fuel cost? And then we make the microfinance payments to be half of what they are currently spending on fuel, and they're given free fuel. So from the day they get their stove, they have immediately half of what they're currently spending back in their pocket. And depending on what country that is, it's usually between 30 and 50 days for the full payoff. And then at that point, they get all their fuel costs back. Wow. All right, here we go. That's how much fuel was left.
Yeah, that deserves applause.
Yay! So there you go. And you see now these are coming into oxygen, so they're starting to combust. But there's your biochar production for the day. We could have gone on for a lot longer.
And that, I missed the beginning part, that can be used for planting?
That can be used for planting. It'll save nutrients, save water, remineralize your soils.
Do you have to dig it in?
Actually, what we found the best system is you take, when you're putting your plants in seedling pots, 30% biochar, 30% all your other potting mix, and then just go from that. transplant it, and then just stays that little ball around the roots is enough to reduce your water and mineral needs.
Just that.
That's it.
Can you just throw it on the ground though?
You probably don't want to do that because it's extremely light, and so if you get a heavy rain pour, it's just going to wash away, right? It's density. It's sort of like the Rice Krispie equivalent of charcoal. Right. Yep. Or put it in your pot. See that coffee cup? That would be perfect. Take that, mix it 30% with biochar, put your seed in that. When it's ready to transplant, you already have all the biochar you need for that plant.
So I was thinking of your perennials and things like that when you want to.
Ooh, perennials and annuals, anything.
But I mean, they're already there. They're there every year.
It lasts for thousands of years, so
I mean, dig something. Dig in.
Yeah. At this point, you can add it in. The Sacred Gardens of Hokkaido, they had the 700-year-old trees that were suffering. They dug a small ditch around the outside of them, buried biochar in that perimeter, and then covered it over so it wouldn't wash away, and the trees came back. So it was able to save a 700-year-old tree. It should be okay for some of the local plants too.
When you put this very lightweight stuff in sand dunes to stabilize them, why doesn't it just wash out to sea?
Because what we do in sand dunes is we take these, we grow them in the greenhouse with the Ammophila. Again, mix 30% biochar, 30% sand. We pump in some nutrients, but natural nutrients, so seaweed-based nutrients. That allows the plant to get established. The roots themselves embed themselves in the charcoal because it does such a good job of holding water that then once you place that in, it stabilizes the dune and it allows it to even resist more wave action because it's got a natural freshwater reserve rather than a saltwater. That's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Martha's Vineyard Celtic, who sponsored this whole event and decided that Martha's Vineyard needs to be energy self-sufficient.
Yes. Yes.
We hope you come back.
We will.
It's really hard to get the kale seeds or sometimes the mustard seeds out of the pods, and they take a little bit more. So another way that we use the trash can is like this. So it's very high-tech, very specialized. If you haven't gone to school for at least 6 years and gotten an advanced degree, I don't recommend getting in the can. So that works pretty well, and actually that was working a little bit better for these beans because they aren't really quite dry enough for the banging to work. So, one of the things that I really want to stress, both for the beginnings of the seed library here and for anyone interested in saving seeds at home, don't go online and research all of the most expensive tools that you can buy and all the specialized stuff. Seed saving has been done for at least 10,000 years without equipment, without expensive tools, without technology, without power. Actually, we don't even have electricity back on our farm. So all of these things are things that you could get at garage sales, you could find around your house. Those are the basic tools that you need. There are a few things that are worth buying, and I'll share some of those with you. So that was threshing. So again, threshing is getting the seeds to release from the plant. I'll show you one more. Does anyone know what this is?
Lettuce.
So this is lettuce. And a lettuce is a really great example of a plant that we don't often get to see go through its full life cycle. That stage when we're harvesting lettuce at the edible stage is it's kind of like the preteen stage of the plant. And for baby lettuce, it's really the infant stage of the plant. When you let your lettuce plants go for seed, some of our lettuces probably get about this wide at the bottom, and if this table was the ground, they get about this tall. They're covered in yellow flowers. There can be 50 to 100 yellow flowers on the top of a healthy, full-size lettuce plant. Each of those yellow flowers is like a dandelion, and it'll turn into little puff with all the little seeds, and that's what each of these little puffs is here, which is full of seeds. This is a little bit far gone. I harvested these earlier and I was just keeping them aside for you guys. So sometimes they're not fully puffed out when you're threshing them, and that's okay. So I'll just show you quickly threshing the lettuce. So screens of any kind really work well for threshing something like this. This is something that we sell. It's one of the few tools that I really recommend. It comes with 3 different size screens. So I just have a bowl on the screen. And some people are sensitive to this, and you might want to wear heavy gloves when you're doing this. But basically you're just rubbing these together to get it to release. And something that's useful with the screen is sometimes actually rubbing against the screen gives you a little bit more friction and gets more of the seeds to release. So I would keep doing that. I would keep doing that until as much of the seed as possible has been released. So now in all of these cases, with whether it's the calendula or the lettuce or the beans, after the threshing, I have seeds and I have chaff. Chaff is the organic matter that's left after the threshing process. For the library especially, and for home gardeners as well, it's important to get as much of the chaff out of the seed, separating the chaff from the seed as possible. It doesn't have to be 100%. I'm a perfectionist. You don't have to be a perfectionist about this. For us as a seed company, we do have to be perfectionists about this kind of thing. On a community scale, we really don't have to worry too much about it. But the reason that you want to separate the chaff from the seeds is that you're trying to get the seeds clean and dry so that they'll store for the winter. If you leave too much chaff in there, chaff has moisture and it can also hold and harbor disease and pests. So if you're storing your seed for the winter and there's moisture or disease or pests in there, it's going to degrade the seed, it might mold, the seeds might get eaten, you might have a seed-borne disease. And then you're not going to have healthy seed to share at the end. So the process of separating the chaff from the seed is called winnowing. And there's a bunch of different ways you can winnow. So the way that we used to do it was a really traditional process. This is a winnow basket. This is actually a Japanese winnow basket made out of bamboo. But a bowl that you found lying around on your old Catskill Resort property that was abandoned with all of the crap that is there works really well too. And so traditional winnowing is putting the seeds and chaff into any kind of container and throwing the seeds up into the air and waiting for that perfect breeze that's not too light and not too strong for that specific kind of seed so that the chaff blows away and the seed lands back in the basket. Another way of doing that type of winnowing is to pour between, which is a little bit more controlled than throwing it up. The throwing into the air works better for heavier seeds, so all the grains, rice, you guys are doing rice here, works well for that. The lighter seeds like lettuce, in here they would just wind up in all the cracks and they would all blow away. What we quickly learned about that type of winnowing is the breeze is either not strong enough or too strong. And so what we've been doing is using a box fan. And I have it set up over there, and I'll demonstrate that a little bit after.